Hey everyone, it's Zach with Palantir Research. Q3 2023 earnings are set to be released in the morning pre-market on Thursday, November 2. Expectations are showing results of AIP and customer acquisitions from AIP Con, AIP bootcamps, and just general AI optimism, and demand has risen much higher over the last few months since last earnings. So I wanted to show you the comparisons from their outlooks released from their Q2 earnings for Q3, and as well as the whole year 2023 in regards to revenue, and also show what the street is expecting. And I'll also cover the metrics I'm looking out for, like customer count and net dollar retention, and what I am personally thinking is good enough on the business end at least to be healthy. And everyone's got their own opinion here. Now, I'm not going to go into the effects of the stock price, since you still can't predict what will happen necessarily if they miss, meet, or exceed, and against their own guidance or Wall Street's expectations, or if their new forward outlook will guide worse or better than expected, or even how the macro will behave considering all the conflicts happening in the world, with something always around the corner. But what do we have today are those expectations. So here was the outlook that was released on Q2 2023 by Palantir for Q3 coming up. They expect around $553 to $557 million of revenue, with just a statement of GAAP net income. So basically 1 cent or more, which is all I care about too as a growth investor. While for the full year of 2023, they expect revenue to be in excess of $2.212 billion, while still being GAAP profitable each quarter. Q3 is big considering this will be the 4th GAAP profitable quarter in a row, making them eligible to be in the S&P. Now, the timeline on actually being included, we don't know that, but hitting the criteria is what matters at this point, and then of course expectations will rise for institutions to purchase them and ensure that Palantir is in their funds. Now, for reference, even if they hit $557 million in revenue, so that top end for Q3, if you compare it to their Q3 2022 earnings report, they had $478 million in revenue, so hitting this top end of guidance would be a growth rate of 16.5% year over year. Now, if they're sandbagging or truly saw this outlook, Wall Street as a whole, so this includes the bulls and bears, are thinking Palantir will pretty much be aligned with the earnings, with the average in the middle around $555 million, with the low and high ends aligned with guidance. And quick note here, these year ago sales and growths are off, so make sure to go on the actual previous earnings to confirm your numbers. And then on the full year end, Palantir had their outlook provided for $2.212 billion. If they hit that exactly, and you compare it to the full year of 2022 earnings report, they had $1.906 billion in revenue, so hitting this would only be 16% full year over year. So that'd be kind of disappointing, actually very disappointing, if they don't exceed this full year guidance, and hopefully they readjust this upwards, where I think investors might be surprised if they lower or keep it the same. Now, for Wall Street, they are basically also aligned with this estimate too, with the average one being $2.21 billion, and even the expectations of $2.23 isn't much more here, basically just rounding. So no one is really putting their necks out when it comes to growth or expectations of Palantir doing much better than having their own outlook provided from last quarter. And maybe for good reason, considering how their business ramps up over time slowly. Now, for myself personally, I would like to see them get back to above 20% year over year quarterly growth by the following quarter, which is Q4. Now, if Palantir is guiding to these growth rates at least higher than Q2's year-over-year growth rate of 13%, so at least hitting 16.5%, that's the right direction here. Now, we want to see that right direction continue. Wall Street doesn't seem to think they'll be able to do much outside of Palantir's own outlook right now, but with all the news, sometimes it makes you wonder if there will be surprise beats because of the AIP cons, customer and partnership announcements, the boot camps, and just the general feeling that Palantir is spreading domestically and abroad every industry. Now, I know this is anecdotal evidence, but it gives that vibe. So what else am I looking for though on earnings? And that's a comment first on GAAP profitability. I myself don't care about the GAAP profitability for a growth company in the short term, but at least for S&P inclusion, since we're already here, we're so close with just this quarter being the 4th one. If they hit it, they're eligible. If they just barely get the 1 cent per quarter, that's enough for me. Now, I'd rather than focus on customer counts and revenue growth over time, of course, and net dollar retention, which will still take time to see how AIP, the AIP bootcamps, and all this media attention that they're trying to put out will run its course. Now, this is, remember, with the caveat that they don't play any games to hit this GAAP profitability like a stepped-up basis, but we haven't seen that the last 2 quarters, only on that first quarter that they achieved profitability. So then the customer count here. What am I looking out for? So for the last quarter, the customer count TTM was 421. The interesting part was a slight increase in the consecutive quarter growth from 7% to 8%, with the year over year being 38%. Now, what I'd like to see is a maintenance or ideally exceeding of this year over year growth of 38%. So if you look at the quarter ending September 2022, they had 337 customers. So a 38% year-over-year growth rate would mean they need at least 465 customers this quarter. And then for the consecutive growth rate of customer count, if they actually hit that 465, that means they grew it consecutively by 44 customers, which is almost 10.5% consecutive growth compared to last one. So I think for good enough earnings with my expectations, this is a reasonable stuff to expect with how management is talking about how AIP boot camps and growing like crazy is happening. And remember, these are official customers and counted when they are revenue generating. So just because they've interacted with Palantir, it doesn't officially count them as a customer. I'm not expecting a blowout here customer count quarter, but more signs of reacceleration and turning this around is what I'm looking for. So just hopefully I'm pleasantly surprised. Now, next is net dollar retention. This always is a tiny bullet point now and not really showing up because it has been going down over the quarters. And on the presentation, it shows that they can maintain their current business while juggling all this new attraction of customers. So last quarter, they had a very tiny bullet point here, net dollar retention of 110%. That's over 100%. So that means that they're expanding within their current customer base. But you need to remember, the more money that is coming in from customers, this raises the baseline of this calculation that they're leveraging. So over time, it'll become more difficult to maintain or grow this without actual crazy growth happening. Now, with my expectations that this is still relying on a trickle effect of customer count to take off first and then the revenue, I don't expect this actually to exceed 110% or even actually reach that. It'd be nice if they could maintain it here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this actually go down slightly. If they drop down to 109%, I'd be happy here. Now, I don't see a world where this drops to under 100% right now. This may become an issue maybe down the line further if their net to catch customers is so wide right now because of AIP. Maybe there are so many customers who sign on with a lower buy-in on their end, and down the line they decide just to get out maybe with low expectations, or maybe because they haven't invested too much time into it yet. Now, that's always a possibility, but something to look out for. But that could also mean that those small customers don't actually give that much money to Palantir, so they're still going to have a tiny effect on net dollar retention. So that's just my speculation there. So hopefully the only way that can actually go down for net dollar retention is if they lose big customers here, or they just don't grow out those contracts anymore if they become too mature. Now, the TTM is always going to rely on new customers coming in as well into the following quarters, because now they're going to have revenue generated from these customers and then some level of expectation and comparison for them to grow that baseline that they've established with them. So as noted, the expectations seem to be mid here from all the Wall Street, falling in line with guidance, and from Palantir. So I'm more interested in customer count and net dollar retention at this point to see if Palantir can juggle getting new potential revenue and generating customers while balancing that with their current business. But let me know down below, what are you expecting for earnings and what metrics are important to you? Do you have a shorter time frame or maybe even a longer one? Maybe I'm too lenient with these, or for some, maybe my expectations are too high, but it's really up to you.